Before the Switch 2 first released, I talked a lot about how I think it's going to age, especially with this new age of PC handhelds we find ourselves in. The Switch 2, at least when it first initially came out, I assumed it would be under much more significant outside pressure from said handhelds, especially once we found out about the Xbox Ally. I thought for sure Nintendo might find themselves on the back foot this generation. But as we've learned more, we've seen actual performance data, and now that the actual Xbox Ally itself is out, I honestly don't think that it ended up being that big of a deal. The Switch 2 has its own clear, defined niche, and it services a slightly different kind of gamer. The Xbox Ally costs $550 more than a Switch 2 no game, which is fine if you're actually getting a lot more for your money. But the Switch 2, for what it's worth, is providing, I think, reasonable competition. And I do think they service different crowds. But with attaching themselves with the Xbox branding, you are starting to attract that console audience, attracting people to your handheld that have never bought a handheld like this before, just like the Steam Deck did back in 2021. So I think it actually prompts this a fairly decent comparison. The Switch 2 versus the Xbox Ally, while I would say it's a little bit lopsided in terms of performance, because for what it's worth, the Xbox Ally is going to be more powerful. Just flat out, significantly more powerful. There's no if and nor buts about it. But it is important to note, the Switch 2 in docked mode max draws like 25 watts in the most intense situation, mostly drawing between 10 to 20 watts depending on the kind of game you're playing. The Xbox Ally in turbo mode when you're connected to power, draws about 35 watts, and there's some times where you can draw up to 45 watts. That is almost double the amount of power draw that the Switch 2 can do. I would expect it to be more powerful, so the Switch 2 being weaker isn't a surprise. But that isn't inherently a bad thing. Developers just have to be more creative. Star Wars Outlaws is a great example of a game that looks fairly comparable to the Xbox Ally running the game while in normal settings. The Switch 2 will be running at a lower FPS, but it's a locked, steady frame rate. And for what it's worth, I'd much rather have a stable frame rate than a frame rate that just swings all over the place, hyper dependent on what's happening on screen, and relies on the worst kind of upscaling. The Switch 2 version, it's not the prettiest looking game ever, but for what it's worth, it looks really good, especially in portable mode. I'm hard pressed telling the visual difference, and I think that boils down to a lot of DLSS. DLSS is the upscaling technology a lot of developers and Nintendo have access to on the Switch 2, thanks to it being built using NVIDIA hardware, opposed to the Xbox Ally, which uses FSR, because it's an AMD-based system. So you don't have the best upscaling technology, unfortunately. FSR is fantastic and has gone a long way in improving, and it looks pretty good. But DLSS is still better, and it looks a lot better, provides much better upscaling results. So when you're playing games like Hogwarts Legacy and Star Wars Outlaws, the end result looks a lot less pixelated and aliasy and less overall blurriness when it comes to on the Switch 2. And not saying that the Xbox Ally looks appreciably worse or pretty much the same in this case, but I just don't see $550 of improvement in terms of image quality. Yes, it might have a higher refresh rate, it's running faster, you're utilizing the high refresh rate screen probably much better than what the Switch 2 can do, but it doesn't look appreciably better. Also, it's important to note that this thing is like 50% smaller in terms of thickness compared against the Xbox Ally. So if the whole reason why you're getting a handheld was for specifically portable gaming, I would have to say the Switch 2 is significantly more portable. And a much nicer, larger screen doesn't hurt either. My biggest complaint with the Xbox Ally, it reuses the same 7-inch screen from the original Ally back in 2022. It's the same 1080p 120Hz screen that's IPS. It's not bad, it's just end screen. It's not eye-catching, it's not something cool to say on the spec sheet, it's just the screen. The Legion Go had very big and high resolution. The Legion Go 2 has OLED. The Legion Go S is big. It doesn't have a standout feature. The Switch 2 though, it's sort of HDR. It is big and it's 120 Hz. I think that's pretty good, all things considered, for Nintendo. Honestly, I like it just because it's big. All these handhelds with 7-inch screens kind of get more annoying than anything else. I don't hate it or anything. It's just, I wish it was a little bit bigger, is all. And I think that's a great sort of counterpoint. It is basically, in terms of footprint, a larger handheld, but it's also, like I said, like 50% thinner. And you do sacrifice like ergonomics. Ergonomics are flatly just going to be better on the Xbox Ally. But are they $550 better? And if you're the kind of target audience like they're hoping for, Xbox console owners and PlayStation owners making the jump to their first PC handheld, you're gonna have to rebuy all those games anyways. So if you buy Switch 2, you might as well save some money and spend $550 in buying a bunch of Switch 2 games. All I'm saying is that you could either buy a console and have no games, or you can buy a Switch 2 and get a couple games and you're set. All that though is a moot point if you're already a PC gamer. There is inherently a larger audience of PC gamers who are more interested in this handheld. But when you're attaching the Xbox brand, the name, and the overall marketing sort of push this is getting is putting it alongside everything Xbox. And when you do that, you necessitate the comparison, and the association with it begs this kind of comparison. How does it stack up against competition? If you were to buy this as an Xbox owner, what are you going to have to do to get the most out of it? And when you buy it and you've only ever owned an Xbox, you most likely will end up with either a few games that happen to have like cross-buy, or you'll most likely end up with nothing. If you're buying this system, your best choice is to spend $1,000 on the Xbox Ally and then get a $30 a month subscription to Game Pass. That seems to be what they're pushing with this, which isn't horrible, but when you're spending $360 a year on a subscription for your $1,000 handheld gaming PC that's supposed to be like an Xbox, it's not ideal, to say the least. To me, the Switch 2 provides a overall simpler experience. The Xbox home screen style operating system you find that's modified Windows essentially on the Xbox Ally, it's fantastic. It's so much easier to use over anything you could find other than a Steam Deck. It's, by all measurements of quality and ease of use, the best handheld operating system you could get your hands on. There's some weirdness occasionally, but it's fine. It is fine. The Switch 2 though, it's a Switch. You most likely own a Switch, so you probably know how to use it. There's 100 million of these things out in the world. You've probably touched one. You can't get any easier to use than a Switch, unless you want to share games. That's a whole freaking nightmare. But it's not like it really matters, because it's not like you're going to share any games anyways on your Xbox Ally, because it's predominantly going to be entirely digital. So I guess it's a tie there, I guess. This Switch 2 simply can't compete 100% in performance. It's not going to be powerful enough. At best, they can hope for the games to look functionally the same, but the Switch 2 is running 20 FPS slower than the Xbox Ally. That's the best you can hope for. Maybe they run identically. Most likely, if you're playing like indie game versus indie game, they're going to run exactly the same because it's an indie game. It can run on a potato. To me, what matters most is overall value. And for the Xbox Ally over the Switch 2, I don't see it. I would love to hear what you guys think though. Do you see $550 of value added with the Xbox Ally over the Switch 2? Or would you just simply take the value option? The version of this where you buy a Switch 2, you get like 3 games, save a little bit of money, maybe buy NSO, and you have an entire huge library of retro games going all the way back from the original NES, the Game Boy, all the way up until the GameCube, potentially Nintendo DS coming very soon, hopefully, if rumors are to be believed. To me, that just sounds like a better deal. I would love to hear what you guys think though down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day. And I forgot to add, if you want to help support the channel, I got a ton of affiliate links down below for anything I talked about in this video. So if you click on those, they go a long way in supporting the channel. I'll say this one more time. Have a wonderful day.